Who are the PayPal Mafia, and how are they linked to apartheid-era South Africa?
Well, they're a group of men who are at the top, the founding of PayPal, all of whom in some way or other grew up in South Africa as children. You've got Musk himself, who was born in South Africa and lived there, went to high school there until he was 18. Musk's grandfather, Canadian grandfather, had been the head of the Canadian branch of a political movement in the 1930s called Technocracy Incorporated, which in essence wanted to scrap democracy in the United States and Canada and have technocrats rule the country, which might sound familiar. That becomes a de facto fascist party, is banned during the Second World War, and then the grandfather moves to apartheid South Africa, having had no connection to the place, in 1950 because he likes the sound of apartheid. And even Errol Musk says of the grandfather, he was an open neo-Nazi. You got Peter Thiel, who was a co-founder with Musk of PayPal. Thiel was born in Germany, but brought to South Africa as a young child. His father was a mining engineer, lived in Johannesburg, and then moved to Southwest Africa, which was then a South African colony, is now Namibia. And he went to school in Swakopmund, which was notorious as probably the last place on the planet where people still openly greeted each other with Heil Hitler and celebrated Hitler's birthday. He went to a German school there before moving to the United States when he was 10 or 11. You've got David Sachs, who was born in Cape Town. He's big in PayPal and is now Trump's AI and crypto czar. He moved to Tennessee as a relatively young child, but grew up in the white South African diaspora there. And you've got Roelof Botha, the grandson of Pik Botha, the last foreign minister of apartheid South Africa. He was the acceptable face of apartheid. You'll remember he used to run around the United States trying to put a gloss on how they were reforming things and that everything was getting better. So you see those four key people at the top of PayPal, and they all have this, very intimate connection to South Africa.
Are all white people racist?
100%. How can you be a white South African and not be racist? And I don't mean that in the way of you necessarily consciously think that black people are inferior. I mean that there is just no way that you could have been born into this society without internalizing racist assumptions. But let's not make that the end of the conversation. It's not racist. It's just a fact. Let's not make that the end of the conversation. Let's say, yes, sure, we are all racist, and what are we going to do about it? Let's move on. Let's not make that the final insult.
Monique, do you agree with Rebecca saying 100%?
No,
all white people are racist?
I disagree with what she's saying. I think that whiteness and white privilege has become this buzzword that you hear all the time. But actually, it's a way to silence anyone that is not of color. What she was basically saying is, if you are a white person, you are racist just because you are white, without any evidence. I am not a racist person. I respect all people. I respect black people, white people, colored people. So I feel it's very offensive to say that all white people are racist. It's just not true. And I think that to make whiteness the enemy is easier to fight than to fight the crippling corruption, to fight unemployment, to fight, to fight the wealth gap, because the political leaders that we have cannot fight that stuff. They don't have the skills to fight that, and then they make race the problem.
Ooh, so Sarah.
Sorry.
You look like you totally disagree here.
I do totally disagree. I think that I'm a little bit torn because I really want to reply to a bit of what Monique has said, but I also really don't want this conversation where we have a potential to disrupt whiteness to be centered around the type of whiteness that is displaying the racism that you say that you aren't. I mean, the comment about people not having skills is inherently racist.
Yeah.
Just to point out one thing. I think we should have the conversation about how to give back the land. I think that's what we should do.
Do you agree with Monique?
Well, I think that what we need to look at is an element of complicity, Mr. Chaba. And I think that fundamentally what we haven't unpacked, we've gone through the TRC process, and what we haven't understood is how white people have benefited firstly from apartheid, and secondly how a particular group of white people in this country have become fabulously rich off the back of apartheid. Now, I think that white complicity overall we can look at, and the responsibility to promote social justice in our country firstly. But when we have two families, there are two families in this country, the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts, names we don't necessarily all know, who have as much wealth as 50% of our people. It's an extraordinary crime.